He was set apart from the womb, marked by a calling that few in history were able to carry. But despite all his supernatural strength, Samson fell into humanity's most common trap: passion. And here lies the controversy. It was not the enemy's sword that defeated him, but a heart surrendered to the wrong person. How could the strongest man in the Bible be destroyed not by armies, but by a kiss? This is a counterintuitive truth that disturbs. Many times, it's not the declared enemy that defeats us, but betrayal disguised as affection. And what's most shocking is realizing that this story did not remain in the past. It echoes in the present. Who has never felt the pain of placing trust in someone only to see that trust cut away, just like Samson's hair? The good news is that even in the midst of downfall, there is still a path to redemption. And that is what we will explore together. How someone who lost everything still found the strength to fulfill his purpose. But before we dive into this journey, I must ask you, are you ready to face the passions that may be stealing your strength today? Samson did not emerge as an ordinary hero. His story began even before he opened his eyes. Still in the womb, he already carried a calling. This reminds us that there are purposes that precede our very awareness, as if life itself came with a contract already signed by the Creator. It's like when someone is born with a natural talent for music or leadership. That is no accident, but a mark pointing towards something greater. Samson's calling makes us reflect on the marks we already carry. Have you ever noticed that some people seem to have an invisible strength to influence, to teach, or even to comfort? That kind of gift cannot be bought in an online course or learned from a tutorial. It springs from within because it was planted there from the beginning. The catch is this: a calling without responsibility becomes nothing more than wasted ability. And here lies the most serious point. Samson's calling was not only a privilege, it was also a burden. Imagine being born with a promise that demanded constant discipline. No cutting the hair, no wine, no breaking of vows. It's like receiving a valuable inheritance, but needing to guard it every single day so it wouldn't be lost. And isn't that deep down what happens with all of us? We receive something precious and spend our lives trying not to let fleeting passion or distraction make us forget the purpose. The great irony of Samson's life is that, though he had been given supernatural strength, his greatest battle was never against the Philistines, but against himself. It's like those who shine in public but fight silent wars in private. Having muscles of steel didn't stop him from having a vulnerable heart. And let's be honest, we all know someone who looks invincible on the outside, but inside carries invisible cracks. Samson's strength came from the Spirit of God, but his downfall began with small daily choices. Who hasn't found themselves giving in to a small temptation, thinking it wouldn't matter? It's like making exceptions in a diet every day. In the end, the scale shows the result. Spiritual life works the same way. The enemy doesn't bring you down all at once. He pulls threads until the fabric is torn apart. And here is the practical lesson. Your strength is not only in the talent you carry, but in how you manage your weaknesses. Want an example? Think of someone who masters oratory but cannot control their ego. Sooner or later, it consumes them. Or someone who has great intelligence but doesn't know how to deal with passion. They may end up in destructive relationships. Samson shows us that a gift can open doors, but only character keeps them open. And this prepares us to understand the next point. When passion, unchecked, stands in the way of calling. Samson had a clear calling, but also a clear weakness: passion. Not just any passion, but the kind that blinds, that makes the heart shout louder than reason. He repeatedly got involved with women who did not share his faith or his purpose. It's like trying to row against the tide. No matter how strong the boat, the current pulls it away. Many times, it's not great enemies that destroy us, but the small concessions made in the name of intense feelings. Now think with me. How many people do you know who lost opportunities, careers, and even families because they couldn't set limits on their passions? A practical example: someone with incredible talent for entrepreneurship but lost in addictions. Or someone with a solid family who lets a fleeting passion lead to betrayal. It's harsh, but real. Passion, when not guided, can turn promises into ruins. Samson believed he could manage both his destiny and his heart at the same time. But the truth is that no one can serve two masters. Calling demands discipline, passion demands surrender. When one overcomes the other, the result is inevitable. And this tension opened the door for the next chapter of his story, a seemingly innocent riddle that revealed much more than simple words. When Samson told the riddle, it seemed like just a game of words, but behind it there was something much bigger, the reflection of his ego. It was as if he were telling the world, "No one can decipher what I have achieved." Pride has that habit of disguising itself in small attitudes, in gestures that seem harmless, but like a crack in a dam, it can grow until it becomes an inevitable fall. Maybe you've seen it. Someone who brags about their talent or achievements, but by showing off too much, attracts people who want to exploit or destroy it. That's exactly what happened with Samson. His riddle was not just a puzzle, it was a reminder that even the most supernatural strength can be sabotaged by human pride. It's like opening the door so the enemy knows where to strike. And here is where his life takes an even more dangerous turn. The riddle was only a rehearsal for what was to come. Betrayal disguised as affection. Because if pride exposed Samson, passion would completely open the breach. And into that space would enter Delilah, bringing with her the most seductive and lethal trap of his story. Delilah did not enter Samson's life abruptly. She came softly, like someone offering rest to a restless heart. And there lies the danger. Often, betrayal does not come with a sword in hand, but with a kiss on the cheek. What seemed like affection was, in reality, the perfect bait to tear from him the most sacred secret, the link between his calling and the presence of God. How many times is it the same in our lives? The greatest downfalls do not come from declared enemies, but from seemingly intimate bonds. Think of everyday situations. A friend who slowly undermines your trust, a relationship that drifts you away from your values, or even a habit that seems harmless, but silently erodes your discipline. That is how betrayal disguises itself, not with the face of war, but with the perfume of seduction. Samson, the man who tore lions apart, could not resist the touch of a passion that did not come from God. It's hard to admit, but often what brings us down is not the strength of the enemy, but the weakness of our own heart. And it is at this point that the drama reaches its peak, because when Delilah finally cuts his hair, she does not merely cut strands. She severs the bridge that connected Samson to his purpose. There, between the sound of the scissors and the weight of betrayal, the story changes its tone. The hero who seemed invincible now finds himself vulnerable, about to experience what no chosen one desires, the day when God departs. Few phrases in the Bible are as heavy as this. Samson did not know that the Lord had left him. Picture the scene. The man who once tore chains apart now wakes up weak, powerless, deceived by his own passion. There was no longer the roar of a slain lion, nor enemies crushed. There was only silence. It was as if the absence of God weighed more than any chain of iron. This scene teaches us that calling is not an eternal guarantee when there is no commitment. Have you ever noticed how some people suddenly seem to lose their glow? Yesterday, they were an inspiration. Today, they are just a memory. This happens when presence is exchanged for fleeting passions, and the pain is even greater because the emptiness comes without warning. One day you wake up and realize the strength is no longer there. And what is most intriguing is that Samson's downfall did not begin with Delilah, but long before, in the small concessions he kept accumulating. When God withdrew, he merely harvested what Samson had already been sowing. And it is precisely at this point, in emptiness and total loss, that the narrative deepens. For from the height of glory, he descends to the depths of humiliation, blind, humiliated, and forgotten. The man who had once been feared by entire nations was now grinding grain like a slave. The hero who once roared against entire armies was now just a blind man being led by the hand of his enemies. Samson's downfall was not only physical, but symbolic. He lost vision, honor, and freedom. It is like when someone who was once a reference of success falls into oblivion, becoming a joke in conversations. This portrait is a powerful reminder. No matter how high someone rises, if they do not care for their character, the fall can be brutal. Have you ever seen how great leaders, artists, or even pastors fall from their pedestal in just days? One slip, an unresolved passion, a betrayal of the heart, and everything collapses. It's harsh, but real. What Samson experienced is a mirror of what anyone can face if they neglect their calling. And paradoxically, it was in that place of complete humiliation that something began to sprout, because often it is in the dust that genuine repentance is born. When all applause ceases and all strength is gone, only one question remains: what now? And it was in that silence of shame that Samson found room for something that would change the course of his story. A prayer in the dark. Samson, blind and forgotten, could have died merely as a defeated slave, but in the silence of shame, something that had been suffocated by passion began to grow: faith. And there, without strength, without honor, and without sight, he discovered that he could still speak to God. This is powerful because it shows us that even in the deepest valley, prayer opens paths that human strength could never reach. Who has never felt like being in the darkness of life, that stage where it seems everything is lost, opportunity, trust, dignity? It is at that point that most people give up. But Samson teaches us that even when everything seems finished, faith still breathes. A simple cry can reignite the flame of redemption. It is like when someone who has lost everything decides to start over, opening a small business, rebuilding their family, returning to God. And this prayer was not for his own glory, but for purpose. Samson asked for strength not to impress, but to fulfill his mission. That difference changes everything. Because when we pray in alignment with our calling, even our downfalls become a stage for God's power. And that plea would open the way for one of the most dramatic moments in history, the final act of a man who, even fallen, would still fulfill his destiny. In the temple of Dagon, Samson was displayed as a war trophy. The Philistines laughed, mocked, and celebrated his downfall. But what they did not know was that this blind, humiliated, and weakened man was about to live his most decisive moment. With his hands on the columns, he cried out for strength one more time, not for himself, but to fulfill the calling of delivering Israel. And in that instant, his weakness became the stage for divine power. Picture the scene: a temple packed with enemies, tall columns holding the structure, and a man, seemingly defeated, becoming the very instrument of his oppressor's destruction. It's like watching a team, considered hopeless, turn the game around in the last seconds. Only this was no game. It was the life of a man and the destiny of a nation. Samson died, but in his death, he brought down more enemies than in all his battles combined. This final act reminds us that even at the limit, God can turn downfall into redemption. Sometimes the last effort, that one step taken when nothing is left, is what changes everything. And Samson's story does not end in tragedy alone, but as an eternal echo that true strength is born precisely when we acknowledge our weakness. And it is from this truth that the greatest lesson of his life emerges. Samson's life is a vivid portrait of how a calling can be grand, but also fragile when not sustained by character. He had strength to tear lions apart, but no mastery to conquer his own passion. And this shows us something profound. True power is not only in defeating external enemies, but in governing the battles within. Samson's downfall still echoes today as a warning for those who confuse talent with purpose. But there is also hope in his story, because even at the end, blind and humiliated, he found redemption. The prayer he made before bringing down the columns reminds us that it is never too late to start over, even if it's with the last breath. And this lesson is practical. How many of us carry scars from wrong choices, but can still cry out, seek and rebuild? No matter the depth of the fall, redemption remains possible. And perhaps this is the greatest irony of Samson's life. It was at the height of weakness that he fulfilled his greatest act of strength. He teaches us that depending on God is not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. That true greatness is not in how much you can endure, but in how much you trust, and that even when everything seems lost, there is still a way to rise again. If not to win as before, at least to finish with dignity. Samson's story is not just about muscles or battles, but about choices. He shows us that a calling may be great, but without discipline, even the strongest can fall. And this leads us to think, what passions today are stealing your strength? What areas of your life have made you forget the purpose God gave you? Perhaps you have already experienced the pain of betrayal, the humiliation of a fall, or the feeling that you lost everything. But remember, if Samson found redemption in his final cry, you too can find a new beginning today. God can still transform your weakness into strength and your defeat into testimony. So the question is, how much longer will you wait before crying out? And before you leave, I want to ask you something simple yet powerful. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message and subscribe to the channel. In doing so, you not only strengthen this community, but also continue receiving stories that can transform your life. Because your strength is not in what you can do alone, but in how much you depend on God.